trust pre-quals, you shouldn't trust pre-quals. I'm going to explain the difference between a pre-qual, pre-approval, approval, and underwriting approval. At the end of this video, you'll know exactly which type of approval you're going to want to shop with. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I have been with the direct lending community and also big banks, and now I am a broker owner of RHM Loans. I'm just going to give you my experience of the difference between pre-qual, pre-approval. Now, all lenders are very different in how they operate, what they're willing to give a pre-approval letter for and what they're not giving a pre-approval letter for. So this is just to educate you, a buyer, why a lender gave you a pre-approval letter where you go to one lender and they ask you for documents and another lender, they don't ask you for documents, and what the difference is. Pre-qual is a completed mortgage application based on what the borrower completes. Credit is not pooled, documentation is not provided, but based on the regular parameters of a loan, the loan officer can make a determination whether this borrower would qualify or not. It really just depends on the detailed information or questions that the loan officer is asking or their application platform. I do not trust pre-quals. You shouldn't trust pre-quals. This is a great starting point for first-time home buyers who may be hesitant about even getting started with purchasing a home, but it isn't accurate enough to start shopping with. Maybe some of the reasons why someone would want a pre-qual as opposed to a pre-approval would be, one, they just have no idea. They have no idea where to start. Based on what I'm telling you, what do you think I would be approved for? What would the numbers kind of look like? I always say it starts with the conversation. And to me, that's what a pre-qual is. It's basically just a conversation that we're having where you're telling me how much you make, what your debts are, and what monthly housing you would want for your mortgage. I then run the numbers based on the numbers you're giving me for a monthly payment. This is what that house purchase price would look like. And then I would go back and say, okay, well, based on how much you're telling me, this is how much you possibly could afford. Now, granted, I would not shop with this. It is not accurate enough to start shopping, especially a first-time home buyer. I am unable to give you accurate numbers of what your private mortgage insurance is. I am unable to run an automated decision engine, so I do not recommend pre-quals for shopping, but they are a great starting point for a first-time homebuyer. Pre-approvals are different from lender to lender. I came from retail lending, especially with a big bank. And with the big bank, they are not required to ask for documentation from a shopper, and they are not allowed to require documents in order to produce a pre-approval. But I will say their pre-approval letter is not produced unless it is ran through an automated decision engine. Let me explain the pre-approval process at RHM Loans. I pride myself in being a very boutique type mortgage broker. Not every borrower or every loan is for everybody. With the pre-approval, the credit is pooled and it should be reviewed by the loan officer. At RHM Loans, I do request for documents to be provided by the borrower. Unfortunately, most borrowers don't realize what they make or what they make that could be used for the mortgage application. I want to see pay stubs. I want to see W-2. I need to know if income needs to be averaged, if I can use your current rate of pay, and I won't be able to know this unless we look at your documentation. Most online lenders and big banks do not require documentation to verify the mortgage application. And this is why they get a bad rap. Sellers will not accept offers from big banks or online lenders unless they are represented by a local loan officer. When I produce a pre-approval letter, my reputation is on the line. If I'm giving a pre-approval letter, I am having a conversation with the borrower, I am having a conversation with the agent, and explaining what steps have been taken for this letter to be produced. If credit is pooled, you can have what is called a DU approval, but a DU approval is actually specific to Fannie Mae. We also have LP approval, which is Freddie Mac. So I like to just use automated decision engine That way it can just go for all platforms, even for the government platforms for FHA and VA. With that being said, there is a saying in our industry, and that is garbage in versus garbage out. So if we have not looked at your documentation and you say you make a certain income, but then that's not true, your DU approval comes back approve eligible, of course you're going to get approve eligible because the income was going off of what you stated, not what your true income is. And this is why it's so important for documentation to be provided during the pre-approval process. You will not get a good experience if the documentation is not provided up front. One of the things you may not realize, especially if you're a realtor watching this video, if you're a first-time home buyer and you have completed an application online and your loan officer produces a pre-approval letter and you approval and you have not provided any documentation. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to get approved, but guys, this is not the type of loan officer you should be doing business with. They should be asking you the right questions, the hard questions, asking you to provide documentation. We want to get all these questions answered before you get committed to a house, because once you get into contract, you're going to be worried about inspections and school districts and utilities and moving trucks and things of that nature. You're not going to want to have in the back of your mind that you're not going to qualify for this mortgage based on something that you completed 2 weeks ago but never provided documentation. That is really the sole purpose of a loan officer. We should be able to educate you on the different products that are out there that are available, and also pre-screening that application, especially before you go into contract. That brings me to an underwriter approval, also known as commitment letter. This is your highest form of approval. I will say it's not always necessary to obtain. Most loan officers forego this step for a couple of reasons. One, they work for a lender that's not equipped with the manpower to complete these formal reviews for all borrowers, especially if the borrower is just checking in to see what they qualify. Number two, the reason why I don't send these in all the time is because the loan officer is well-versed with scenarios that can make a determination without an underwriter's review up front. But that doesn't mean that I don't sometimes find it necessary to send my borrowers to an underwriter to pre-review the loan before committing to a contract. I normally do this when we have what's called a manual underwrite. This is for low FICO borrowers that are doing FHA with 10% down. There's lots of gray area with VA underwriting, and we love to always put you in front of the underwriter to ask those questions before we get into contract, because a lot of those times we can pass these obstacles, but we need time, and we don't have that once we go into contract. Just to recap, a pre-qual is a great starting point, but it's not enough that you should start shopping. A pre-approval is only good if your documentation has been provided by the loan officer and they have actually reviewed it and have updated your mortgage application to match your documentation. The underwriting approval commitment letter, this is the highest form of approval, but isn't required and won't always be able to be obtained because of resources that the underwriters need to be working on actual files and not hypothetical. I have over 15 years experience with mortgage applications. I have seen so many scenarios. I've worked with many loan officers, many files, and if I don't know the answer, I at least know where to find it. So thank you so much for your trust, and I look forward to reviewing your application.